to welcome everyone on behalf of the Center for Latin American Studies and on behalf of the University of California at Berkeley. I'm Harley Shaken, the chair of the Center for Latin American Studies, and we're especially, this is more complicated than it was, the switch. And we're especially pleased and honored to introduce our speaker this evening, Daniel Cohn-Bendit. He's someone who hardly needs an introduction. He is a member of the European Parliament, the only member that has been elected from France and from Germany and from France again and from Germany again. He is the co-chair of the Green Coalition in the European Parliament, but his contribution goes well beyond that formal title. He has been unusually insightful, thoughtful, provocative, and visionary. He has been pragmatic and engaged. He has made a significant contribution to the issue of green directions, of ecological change, and of the political calculus that makes this possible. So please join me in welcoming Daniel Cohn-Bendit.
Oh, you give me your, okay. So I have half an hour to introduce. First I would say hello. I'm pleased to be in Berkeley, and I'm getting old because Harley and Vicky told me that I was a few years ago in Berkeley and that I talked in Berkeley, and I completely forgot it. So Alzheimer is coming nearer to me, but this is the history of everybody. Now, first I want to say why Europe? Because in a lot of discussion in the States, I heard and understood that nobody understands something about Europe. So I want to give you a very personal analysis or a personal story of why Europe. I'm born 1945. I was produced by the first biological possibility after the landing of the Americans, the English, some French, Canadian in the Normandy. It was in June 44. And then my parents, who flew from Germany in 33 and lived in the south of France, having a house for children where their parents disappeared in concentration camp all over Europe. And for them, this landing was the beginning of a new hope. And I'm so a child of a new hope, and we have a lot of debate with pacifists, and I'm half a pacifist and I'm not. Perhaps I will say something about it. But pacifists always say nothing positive came out from military intervention. And I always say at this moment, objection. I know one good result of a military intervention is my birth. So I'm born in 45, and imagine that coming out of the body of my mother, I would have talked and say to my parents, in 50 years, we have 45, there will be no border anymore between France and Germany. There will be no control of all over Europe, no police control of passport if you travel, no soldiers at the borders between the countries. My parents would have had a problem. First, I talked too early, and second, I said nonsense. Because after the Second World War, nobody dared to believe that it was the last one, because we had the first one, we had the 1870. Europe was used that every 25 years you had a war. And to imagine that this Europe can overcome the contradiction from the nation state was simply impossible. So for me, Europe is a dream. Europe, the construction of Europe, what becomes the European Union, to overcome the hate between these European countries is really the realization of mankind utopia. I know it is a big word, but it's a reality. The reality that you can only understand if you rethink how was the world in Europe in 45 or in 43 or in 42. So starting from them, this dream had then different evolution. And I called it the dream of rivers. Europe is a continuity of dream of rivers. The first dream of river was the Rhine. The Rhine was a river who divided Europe. It was the river of war. 50 years later, it is a river who unified France and Germany, who unified the western part of Europe, and not anymore a division, a frontier. The second dream of Europe is the Oder. The Oder divided East and West Europe. It is at the border of who was East Germany and Poland. It was a division, it was the Iron Curtain. And suddenly, after the German reunification, the Iron Curtain was over and Poland get in the European Union. And now the Oder is not anymore a river who is a border where people were shot because they wanted to go from east to west. No, it's a river who unified the western part of Europe and the eastern part of Europe. And you could continue to have these dreams and to dream the dream of the Bosporus. So to get Turkey in Europe. This is not done and is highly controversial in Europe. But I think that it wasn't Obama who invented we can. It was the European. They invented, yes, we can overcome everything. So the situation or the result of the debate about Turkey is not over. I don't know how it will finish, but I think the dream of the Bosporus is the next dream. And if you want to continue to dream, because I think mankind is done to dream, if politics is not embedded in dreams, it has no sense to make politics. You could also dream the dream of the East Mediterranean and say, perhaps, I say perhaps, and it's really very abstract, but it's a worthwhile dream. The solution to get a solution in the Middle East between Israeli and Palestinian would be an integration of the Israelis and the Palestinians in the European Union. Why do I say this? Because the strength of the Europe was to overcome the hate. You had the hate between the French and the German. You had the hate between East and West, and all this now in the framework of a community, an economical, a market, and a community on values, This bring people, different nation, people together who was impossible. So let's dream the last dream of the Mediterranean for the Israeli and the Palestinian. We can come back on this. Now, this is the reason for me of Europe. Now, of course, today you can't only make a definition of Europe by the past. You get the past, we have it in a pocket. We should always remember where we come, but we have also to think where we want to go, where we have to go. And now, I don't want to make the story of the European Union. I just want to make one little stop. Why do we have a common money in Europe? You know that the European had different money, you know. They had the Deutschmark, the franc, the Italian lira, etc. Now, for a long time, the European tried to have a common money. In the 70s, they tried, but it was politically impossible to get the state, to get the economy together, because they were very spread. And then there was a problem of the German unification in the 90s, at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s. One reason, or one idea of the construction of Europe was no European state should have an hegemony in Europe. They're all state and all people are equal, big or small or big. With the German unification, you would have a bigger Germany. Not 60 million people, what is more or less what's the same than France, who has 55. Germany had 62. But then Germany would have 85 million. So it would be the biggest. And then the fear of the war came back for part of generation. Would Germany be leading Europe if it's unified? And at that time, it was the idea of Mitterrand to say, the French and the British did the same, that we will only accept a German unification if we also go deeper in the European construction. And then they decide at that time to make a common money, who is the euro. And the euro is a political construction before being an economic construction. But the economic construction is now the heart of the European Union. And now I jump to the today. What is the problem of Europe and the weakness of Europe? I think, and then it's the same, you will understand it, it's the problem of every region in the world. Europe confronted by the financial crisis, the economic crisis, and the ecological crisis, has to give an answer to this crisis. And the problem is, can we give an answer one after the other? So we solve the financial crisis and then we can go to climate change? Or do we have to do it together? But one thing is sure, no European nation state can do it alone. The Germans, or the French, or Luxembourg, or which country you take, a big one, they can have the best financial structure, the best ecological politics. It doesn't have the critical mass to influence really on the global world. Because between 45 and today, we had this extraordinary development of globalization. And in globalization, and this is the problem now of a lot of Europeans, in this globalization, the reality, the importance of a nation state diminished. Diminished because you don't have the influence, politically, economic, that you need to have if you want really to influence and to change the thing in the globalized world. So with this financial crisis, the European debates are, do we have national strategy of regulation of the financial markets, or do we have a European strategy of regulation of the financial markets? In the economic crisis, do we have national solution, economic solution against the economic crisis, or do we have European? And to match climate change, do we have national solution or European? And this means if you give European solution, it means you have to strengthen politically the European Union. You have to strengthen the structure of decision of the European Union. If you strengthen the decision and the structure of the European Union, you weaken the nation state politics. You weaken the nation state. Now, if I talk like this, it's simple. And I would say it's logic. But the problem is that nation states is also a part of the identity of everybody, of the people. It's, you know, they are born French or German, and no one had in his mind, I'm born European. I think I'm the only one in Europe who think this, but I like to be the exception. You know, it gives me a value, even if it's not a very big one, but you know, it's a real problem. So we saw that the evolution of the European Union is quite complicated because the political culture in which we grown in was national culture. We have in Europe national public opinion. You don't have a European public opinion. You have national papers. They think nationally. They have their way of thinking, their logic, the way they handle politics is national. So in the moment, a lot of people fear that they will lose a lot if they lose their national, not identity, but the national influence of politics. But on the other side, let's take the globalization. The banks, they are not national. A big bank, you know, they don't say, no, we are a German bank or we are a French bank or whatever. They are global player. If you take the big industry, they are not national. They are global player. So if you want to regulate, and this is, I think, the main thing, the traditional debate was socialism in history or capitalism. I think this is over. Why? Because the socialist idea and the capitalist idea were as wrong. Of course, big difference are in liberties. Big difference are in democracy. I will talk this later. But the main thing is that socialists and capitalists saw that to the good for the people is a permanent growth. And what was the crisis that we lived in? It was very simple to explain. It was more rapidly. And if you take the subprime, if you take everything, the problem is that we live in a world where a lot of people think that the left think if the growth is growing, we can make more for everybody. The capitalist says if the growth is growing, we will make more money. But it's the same logic. I think with the climate crisis, with the ecological crisis, we slowly, and it lasted the last 20 years, we slowly understand that our way of production, our way of economic is destroying the planet. So if we destroy the planet, what will be the end? And the climate problem is the best demonstration of it. And if you are really, if General Motors or poor people, if the planet is going over, and we see now how effective the destruction of climate change can be. The example, New Orleans, the example of what we had in the last year is only the beginning. So if we agree that one of the problems of our world is the way of production, we have also to agree to think about a second thing. It's not only the production, it's also our thinking of our way of life. And this makes the problem much more difficult. Because you can say it in the traditional political theory, the good and the bad. The bad are the capitalists and the good are the people. And you can go on in history and you are always on the good side. Now, the idea is we have to regulate the production, to regulate the way of life of the people. But this can't be done on a nation level. So the idea is that Europe is one of the necessary player to regulate financial, to regulate the economy, to give rules. We don't say we want to a planified, a state-organized or European organized economy. We want a market who has regulate, who has rules who are transparent, that you can control. But if this is true, we have also with the people, if we don't want an authoritarian or totalitarian solution of the problem to force the people, we have to change our culture, our way of life, but to do it democratically, we need an open debate on this, an open discussion, what is right and what is wrong, what we need and what we can afford and what we can transform. And I think it's where we are today. We are today that the battle that we fight, the ecological movement in Europe, is the battle of the necessary ecological transformation of the economy and the ecological transformation of the way of life. This is a long way, a difficult way. But we make step forward. But this will, and you had in Copenhagen, if you remember the big negotiation on climate, it was a catastrophe. It was a catastrophe. Why? Because the European didn't have the guts, the organization to lead. The American Obama was afraid by a Congress, so he didn't do anything. The Chinese, even if they do things, they have one idea. Whatever we do, nobody can and should control us. So the problem of the Chinese is not that they don't want to make an ecological politics. They know they need it. But politically, that there are an international regulation, a control, a transparency, that means that national sovereignty can be controlled, for them is unthinkable. It's exactly the same that the American. Exactly the same. Remember the International Tribunal, how is it named now in English? The International Tribunal for Liberty, no, for Justice, thank you. The American never signed. Why? Because in the American way of thinking, it is quite impossible that there is an international tribunal for American. They think there can be an international tribunal for everybody except for American. And this is one of the part of the problem of the global level. The European has gone to the step of saying that we delegate national sovereignty to the European sovereignty. And now we have to find a form of regulation of national sovereignty on a big scale, also with states like China, United States, or whatever, that we have rules, and these rules are common rules. I give you an example. You have the International Organization of Trade. You have rules. You have rules, environmental UN rules. You have international labor rules. So one of the most simple things to regulate international trade is to say all these rules should be rules for everybody. So for example, in the International Trade Organization, China should be only accepted if they accepted the international rules of labor. And one of the major rules, international rule of labor, is the freedom of organization of the workers. So if, we have always a debate, what is the just growth and not growth in China? We can't decide it. But the only thing that we can really debate with the Chinese is, if your workers' organization are free, they will fight for a growth of the salary. And you will see that the balance will be created by the fight of the workers. It's what had happened in Europe, what had happened also in the United States or in other parts of the world. Now, the problem that the American and the European have, and the workers' organization had, we had a discussion also today with one representative of the labor, it's very simple. With the ecological crisis, the mantra of the workers' movement has to change. And because there are jobs that people have that they will lose. And there are ways of production, yet you have to stop. The most obvious, if you take the climate, are the coal mines. And all the green coal, this argument, also from Obama, is rubbish. Green coal doesn't exist. Coal is black. I never saw green coal, neither Obama. And I think this is, you see a necessity and then you invent something. No, you have to go to a radical alternative in energy. But radical alternative in energy is one thing. You have to go also to a radical economy of energy. We have to consume less energy. This can be an incredible job creation market. Not only renewable, but all the housing, public and private, consume too much and produce too much CO2 emission. All this could be an incredible program of work. And my idea, and our idea for the Greens in Europe is to say the debate of Keynes in a nation state, because the nation state has so much debt, is impossible. The real place of a Keynesian politics is in Brussels, is of the European level, a European investment to really change, to go to this transformation of the economy, ecological transformation. In one of the biggest battles and biggest problem, and don't say it's an easy solution. In the United States, it's much more complicated. It is a society built on the automobile. A society built of automobile is a society built of a big CO2 emission. Of course, you will tell me, and there are possibility to have electric cars, inshallah. Yes, you will have it, and we will have it. But we know how the American car industry, even the European, didn't want the solution because it was much more money to continue with the production line that they have developed in the 60s and 70s instead of having to reinvent new production lines. It's why they refuse proposition of electric cars who are made, who did exist. But this is only one part of the problem. And I was astonished. I read today in the paper, it was USA Today, that Amtrak wants to start to build in 2015 high-speed train from New York to Boston to Baltimore, Washington, and I know that you want in California, you want to build a high-speed train between San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. You know what does it mean? And this is the reality of the United States. You are 30 years back. So, you know, this is incredible. This United States, who are, I think, in all technology, who is linked to military technology, top of the world. The rest, you are a third world country. And you know, it's unbelievable, yes, that you start with high-speed train to build the first one in 2015. You know, they started in France 25 years ago, but this is not only, it can be a joke, okay, you didn't build train. It's a symbol, you know, how backwards the thinking of the technology of modernity that you have, you know, you are stick, and part of Europe, long time, was stick in the 50s. The second demonstration of being stick in the 50s technologically are nuclear power. So, you know, green coal, say, it was one of the invention. The other one is we need nuclear power because it's a clean energy. Nobody knows what to do with nuclear waste. Nobody, all over the world. And if you produce new nuclear plant, it's not only that you produce more nuclear waste. You produce nuclear plant and they will finish. And if you have to dismantle a nuclear plant, all the plant is nuclear waste. So you will have a dramatic increase of nuclear waste in a time that nobody knows what to do with. Now you would tell me, we have time. This debate on nuclear waste, we have now 30 years. I remember 30 years ago, I had a debate with a high nuclear scientist, and he told me, Danny, don't be afraid. We scientists, we will find a solution. So every year I phone him and I ask him, did you find the solution? I'm very interested in. And they didn't. So of course, there will be solution. Nevada, somewhere in Nevada, behind the Ural in Russia, in the desert of Gobi in China. Huh? No, Golim is another point. Golim is too small, you know, but you will, for the mass of the European waste, Golim is nothing, and France has no one. Most of the nuclear energy is in France. And you know, nuclear energy in France is a co-production of a very interesting coalition. It was the coalition after the Second World War of Gaullists and communists. And Gaullists and communists, were the two pillars of nuclear energy in France. And it's so my demonstration about the wrong ideas in the left or in the socialist or capitalist is coming from there. They had the wrong also idea of production. But the problem is that it is not true that nuclear is renewable. It is not true that it is clean because you don't know what to do with the waste. And I don't talk about the danger and terrorism, because I don't know and I don't want to scare people. I just have this fact. So the big problem now of the ecological transformation of our economies, plural, you can't do it at the end only in Europe. You need to do it also in the States. You need to do it in China, Brazil, and we are far away of it. So the next step, and I think this is to finish the introduction. I'm sorry that I'm a little over the 5 minutes that you gave me. Why we need Europe? We need Europe because we need a multilateral world. A multilateral world is a world where from different situations of the planet, you have an equal influence of the regulation of this planet and an equal political weight in this planet. And of course, the problem of the United States, and I have no solution to this. The United States understand politics, and this is Democrats or Republican, at the end, structurally have the same idea. Politics in the world is always coalition of the willing. And coalition of the willing means for Americans led by the American. The politics that we need and the world that we need is a world where equal possibility of influence and to regulate a democracy. So it's a new, if you want, we need to reinvent the United Nations. You need to reinvent the regulation, political regulation by the United Nations. For this, we need a critical political mass, not only an economic one, who can influence, who can battle, who can be a contradiction, or with one or the other part of the world, United States, or Brazil, or India, or China, or whatever. And for this, if the European nation state, the European people, wants to have an influence, also to defend their culture, to defend their identity, the only chance that they have is through Europe. A French, a German, a Luxembourg, an Italian, a Dutch, take what you want, compared to the problem of the world, don't exist. They exist only and can have influence only through Europe. So I still think Europe is still a dream worthwhile to fight for. Thank you.